Welcome to The Explainer. So glad you're here because today we are going on an absolutely wild narrative ride. We are about to unpack a piece of source material that is, frankly, kind of mind-bending. It somehow begins as this chaotic, high-energy, totally ridiculous anime crossover, and then, almost without you noticing, it slowly and methodically transforms into this profoundly deep philosophical realization. We're talking about the very nature of human power, systemic corruption, and basic survival. It is incredibly fascinating to see what happens when hypermodern, totally silly pop culture tropes violently collide with ancient, unyielding philosophy. We're going to peel back literally every single layer of this story, decoding how our two main characters, Ed and Emma, stumble from a bizarre, frantic morning panic right into a deep allegorical critique of corrupt kingdoms. It's the kind of journey that really demands we look closely at every little detail, because, as you'll see, absolutely nothing here is an accident. Okay, let's dive right into this. And you know what? We are actually going to completely bypass a standard agenda today just to preserve the sheer element of surprise that makes this text so incredible. Instead, I want to ground us immediately with this one foundational quote. Even a king depends on the harvest. That's from Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 8. Now, if you know anything about the book of Ecclesiastes, you know it is a notoriously heavy, deeply existential text. It constantly wrestles with the meaninglessness of human ambition and just how incredibly fleeting worldly power actually is. I want you to keep this profound philosophical weight tucked right in the back of your mind as we go forward. Honestly, it might not make a lick of sense right now, especially given the absolutely absurd place our story actually kicks off, but I promise you, this single ancient sentence, it is the absolute anchor of the entire universe we're about to explore. It is the ultimate truth that our characters are unknowingly hurtling towards. So where does this profound realization actually begin? Well, it begins in total, unadulterated, bizarre chaos. Picture this. We open on our main guy, Ed, waking up in a sheer panic. He literally falls out of bed, screaming at the top of his lungs that the Vongola bells are ringing and that an anime villain named Byakuran is actively attacking their base. Now, for the uninitiated, these are some incredibly deep-cut anime references. Byakuran is this dimension-hopping antagonist from a show called Hitman Reborn. He's a guy capable of seeing across parallel realities to completely crush his enemies. His friend Emma rushes into the room, totally unimpressed, basically telling him to drop the dramatic act and calm down. But Ed is dead serious. He insists that anime characters have literally been crossing over into their reality ever since something called the Wolf Barons of Shining Force version MMO made their move. Ed genuinely believes this dimension-hopping villain is actively hunting him down right at this very moment. It is this delightfully ridiculous, totally surface-level pop culture threat. Now, to combat this massive, multidimensional anime threat, Ed decides he has to invoke something equally terrifying. He calls it Haragoromi Geine mode, which roughly translates to villain in glasses mode. If you watch anime, you know exactly what this is. It's that classic trope where a character taps into these highly intellectual, but just disastrously dastardly problem-solving skills. Ed gets this intense, obsessively crazed, what the anime community calls yanderic look in his eyes, which absolutely freaks Emma out. The spotlight in their room literally shifts to shine directly on a bookshelf. In this ultra-villainous, overly dramatic state, he summons a book he refers to as Benedict. He claims he named it Benedict using universal transliteration, which, let's be real, is a completely nonsensical, totally made-up superpower. He pushes his glasses up his nose so they gleam menacingly in the light. The comedic build-up here is just so thick you could cut it with a knife. It perfectly sets us up for the ultimate punchline. But here is the incredible comedic whiplash of the text. When this mysterious, supposedly deeply powerful book called Benedict actually flies off the shelf and into Ed's waiting hands, we discover what it really is. Benedict is just the Good News Bible. That's it. Ed has gone through this incredibly elaborate, sweat-inducing supervillain power-up sequence just to dramatically grab a standard paperback Bible off his bedroom shelf. He even warns Emma to stand back because opening it could get, quote, dangerous. And remarkably, in the totally bizarre context of this story, he actually isn't entirely wrong. Because the very second he cracks the spine, a glaring, blinding light pours out into the room, and it projects a terrifying vision straight into their reality. And this brilliantly illustrates the massive tonal shift that hits us next. Think about it. One moment, Ed is completely bracing himself for a fictional pop culture anime villain. But the moment that book opens, the actual threat projected into the room is something entirely different and infinitely heavier. They are suddenly bombarded with vivid, horrific visions of the fall of Nineveh from the book of Nahum, chapter 2, alongside the overwhelming divine judgment of wicked cities found in Jonah chapters 1 and 2. The sheer dread of these texts, the ancient, inescapable wrath of a higher power just completely tearing down these seemingly impenetrable human fortresses, floods their bedroom. Suddenly, Ed and Emma aren't dealing with fictional characters crossing dimensions anymore. Not at all. They are staring face to face with overwhelming, real-world, biblical destruction. All the silliness we just talked about instantly evaporates. It's completely replaced by this suffocating, heavy existential dread. Dropping to the floor in absolute, sheer shock, Ed just mutters, "As expected of God, you don't have to be aware that you fall into his plans to fall into his plans. Kami-sama kawaii," which translates to, "God, you are scary." I really want us to just sit with this psychological shock for a second. This is a massive thematic pivot for the entire story. Ed and Emma suddenly realize that their seemingly random, totally chaotic morning, even that ridiculous anime paranoia about parallel dimensions, was actually all just a vehicle orchestrating them toward this exact moment of divine revelation. The truly terrifying part for them isn't the fiery vision itself. It's the sudden, creeping realization that they are mere pawns in a grand, infinitely complex chess game. They realize they're operating inside a narrative architecture that is far, far beyond their comprehension, guided by an author who plays by rules they don't even know exist. Desperate, terrified, and just looking for some kind of anchor, Ed decides to turn just one more page, seeking some kind of resolution or escape from this dread. And he lands right on Ecclesiastes 5:8, which reads, "Don't be surprised when you see that the government oppresses the poor and denies them justice and their rights. Every official is protected by the one over him, and both are protected by still higher officials." And boom, there it is. Just think about how profoundly accurate this 2,000-year-old text is regarding modern bureaucratic corruption. It so perfectly describes the insulated layers of systemic oppression we still see in governments today. Reading this exact breakdown of how power insulates and protects itself triggers what Ed calls an instant regeneration. He literally leaps up from the ground, his glasses sparking in the light again, completely transformed. He has just had a massive, world-shattering epiphany about the true nature of power in human society. Fueled by this massive epiphany, Ed decides to upgrade himself yet again. He enters what the text calls Regalia Haori mode. Now wait, for context, while a normal Haori mode in anime is just a trope used to point toward a specific character's perspective, this Regalia version, it is on a whole different level entirely. It is donned for one specific, devastating purpose: to completely crush a concept. Ed goes totally all out, invoking this ridiculous, made-up ability called Pyrostellus Luminaries to magically force a matching Regalia costume right onto Emma. He literally bonds their minds together just so her brain can even process the complex, abstract logic he is about to unleash on her. It's wonderfully, wonderfully absurd. But it signals to us, the audience, that they are gearing up to completely dismantle our fundamental understanding of societal power structures. Now, what's really interesting about this slide and this moment in the story is how it marks our total descent into the deeper layers of this narrative iceberg. Together, standing in their matching metaphorical costumes, Ed and Emma literally retitle the very episode they are living in. They declare a brand new scenario: the Corrupt Kingdom. And just like that, the anime jokes are officially dropped. We are no longer talking about parallel dimensions or dimension-hopping villains or matching costumes. We are entering a literal socio-political allegory that is specifically designed to ruthlessly expose the extreme fragility of human authority and the absolute arrogance of absolute rulers. Let's trace how this builds, as Ed narrates the rapid, brutal escalation of this hypothetical corrupt kingdom. It's a quick timeline, but it's devastating. On day one, poor citizens peacefully gather to simply demand their basic human rights. The rulers, totally annoyed by this demonstration, don't even bother to negotiate. They just order the police to open fire, wounding and killing the people just to force a retreat. It's horrific. On day two, the citizens return, understandably demanding justice for the murders, and this time they threaten to sue the judiciary and impeach the president using the legal system. The rulers panic, suddenly realizing the people actually hold the structural power to unmake them. So by day three, the rulers take drastic authoritarian action. They simply amend the laws themselves. They alter the very fabric of their society to ensure their power is absolute and unquestionable. It is this chillingly neutral, step-by-step mechanics check of cold, bureaucratic evil, the act of just rewriting the rules of the game to make atrocities perfectly legal and insulate the ruling class from any accountability whatsoever. So, feeling utterly invincible after literally rewriting the laws of the land to favor themselves, the rulers actually start singing karaoke to celebrate their newly minted absolute power. I mean, the sheer audacity. With incredible theatrical arrogance, they sing, "This country is like a cooking pot. In it, we are the meat. Like the pot protects the meat, this town will protect us." Let's unpack that cooking pot metaphor for a second, because it's brilliant. It is a display of ultimate, blinding hubris. The rulers genuinely believe that the system they have rigged, the iron walls of the pot of the state, makes them completely, 100% untouchable. They literally view themselves as the prime substance, the meat, inherently valuable and protected by the impenetrable walls of the very legal system they've just corrupted to serve only themselves. But here is where Ed's allegory takes a massive turn into the brilliant and honestly, the totally surreal. Ed pauses his story to point out one singular fatal flaw in the ruler's supposedly perfect logic. He notes, little did they know that their food supply was listening to their empty boasting. Ed leans into the old saying that trees have ears and notes that nature itself tolerates no rivals. In an incredible twist of surreal logic, we completely transition from a gritty, boots-on-the-ground political drama right into a literal revolt of nature. The trees themselves, the silent, foundational source of all food, hear the arrogant karaoke boasts of these absolute kings and decide to stage a rebellion of their very own. So the crucial point here is exactly how the trees retaliate. They don't have armies. They respond with a brilliant, simple realization. If we don't bear our fruit, the animals won't eat. If the animals don't eat, those boastful kings won't eat. The trees understand something the kings have entirely forgotten in their massive hubris. The fragility of human power is absolute when it's faced with biological necessity. When the kingdom is starving, those kings will very quickly realize that their absolute political power was nothing but a fragile illusion. All their authority, their newly minted laws, their highly militarized police force, all of it was entirely derived from their control of the food supply. By simply refusing to produce fruit, the lowest, most ignored element of the kingdom effortlessly collapses the very highest human authority. It's checkmate. Which brings Ed to the ultimate conclusion of his massive epiphany, the true hierarchy of power. And it reveals a staggering chain of command that most of us never think about. Let's walk through it. The common people serve the authorities serve the rulers serve the king. But the king? The king serves the food, and the food serves God. This is the incredible, mind-bending realization Ed pulls from that original ancient biblical verse in Ecclesiastes. Human political structures, no matter how corrupt they become, no matter how absolute they make their laws, or how thick they cast their metaphorical iron pots, are entirely 100% subordinate to the basic biological realities of the harvest. We literally spend so much time in our lives analyzing and worrying about the peak of human authority, but this brilliantly illustrates that the very foundation of human survival always overrules it. Now, Emma is genuinely impressed by this, and how could she not be? It's an incredibly ridiculous, yet deeply intelligent allegory. It's a flawless takedown of systemic corruption. But we need a comedic reality check here, because the text brings us right back to earth. Ed's epiphany perfectly solves the deep philosophical debate about power, sure, but it doesn't solve his immediate surface-level problem. Byakurin, the anime villain, is still allegedly invading their reality outside their window. Emma, trying to apply a bit of straightforward, comforting logic to the situation, tells Ed not to worry about it. She figures, hey, if anime villains are crossing over, then the anime heroes, like Vongola X from the show, will surely cross over too and defeat the villains exactly like they always do in the source material. It's the natural order of tropes, right? It makes sense. It's comforting logic. The good guys always win. But Ed pushes his glasses up one last time, looking out, and asks a truly haunting question. How about those authors who don't write happy endings? And I really want us to just slow down and think about that for a second. Ed recognizes that they are falling into someone else's plans. And if they're just characters existing in a reality governed by a higher author, whether that's an anime creator or a divine cosmic architect, what guarantee do they actually have that the story they are living in is designed to end well for them? It completely strips away all the comfort of narrative tropes we rely on, and it leaves us deeply pondering. Who is actually writing the reality of our world? And perhaps more importantly, what kind of ending do they have in store for us?